Some people love their jobs, some people hate their jobs. And in the mid-1920s, some women's jobs made their jaws fall off. So today, let's talk about the Radium Girls. On April 20th, 1902, Marie and Pierre Curie isolated radium, a brand new element. And boy, did it take off in the marketplace. Everything eventually had a radium variant because radium was touted as something that is almost a health elixir, something that makes you healthier, something that makes your life even better. So if you wanted to buy a regular toothpaste, well then you could also buy a radium toothpaste or radium makeup, or there's so many things that you could buy that had radium in it, infused, coated, whatever. Now this is because we didn't understand the dangers of radium back then. We knew that it killed cancer cells eventually, and then in the coming years, we realized that radiation could kill cancer cells, but we didn't realize that radiation could kill healthy human cells too. So we were only being told half the story. And to make things worse, there are some quack doctors, maybe paid, maybe not, who would tout radium as a miracle cure for basically everything. So just like in the 40s and 50s, when doctors would say, oh, this brand of cigarettes doesn't make me have lung cancer, doesn't give me a cough, whatever, same sort of idea in the early 1900s, where doctors would tell you, oh, well, radium is great for you, it's gonna make you healthier, you look younger, whatever the case is. So because of that, it had massive popularity. I mean, we're talking about toothpaste to make your teeth whiter. We're talking about syrup. We're talking about you could buy vats to put your water in, your drinking water at home, that were coated with radium on the inside, so then you had more or less radioactive water. Absolutely insane to think about now, but back in the day, it was kind of a prestigious thing to have radium in everything that you consume. You could even buy radium suppositories. Just take 2 seconds to think about that. Radium suppositories. Now obviously that sounds like a pain in the butt, but we're talking about radium spas also. So you could pay money to go to a place to take radium infused baths. So tubs that were coated in radium, then filled with water, you put your body in it, or saunas, where it was radium infused saunas. I'm not joking. This was so successful that people would start opening these up over and over and over again and becoming quite wealthy doing it. Another property of radium is that it's glow in the dark. It's luminescent. This is great because then you can paint things with it and then they're gonna glow in the dark. Now in 1917, when the USA got involved in World War I, the military needed a ton of glow in the dark things. Faces for their instruments, watches, clocks, you name it, they needed to glow in the dark in order to give them better visibility at night, give them an upper hand, give them an advantage, which is what war is all about. So in 1917, radium skyrocketed. There was such a wild demand, and that was great for United States Uranium, a company that was making radium for many years before that, and then they made this paint, Undark they called it. And this is what was used to paint all of those instruments, clock dials, faces, hands, all of that, and more. So in response of needing all this equipment that was infused with radium or painted with this Undark, which is Radium Paint more or less, these plants started popping up in many different states all over the USA. And one of them in particular, in Orange, New Jersey, really specialized in painting watch faces, hands, numerals, you name it. They're specialized in making timepieces that are being able to be read in the dark. And because of, at the time, we know most men went to war and then women entered the workplace, some for the very first time, in numbers like we've never seen before in the US. So it was mostly women working in this factory in Orange, New Jersey. So basically, this is a new job. Most women never worked before this, or it was very rare anyway. This is a job that was prestigious. It was one of those jobs that was very well respected, great pay, great hours. The working conditions were really good, especially for that time over 100 years ago. And it was seen as a benefit because, like we said before, radium was one of those things that made you healthier, made your skin glow. Everything was great about you if you had radium in your products. So most people were paying to go to spas for radium. These women were getting paid to work with radium all day long. So imagine you're a woman working in this plant. This isn't easy work, okay? It's not dangerous work. That's what it was touted as. Now we know different. But it is work where you're painting small dials, oftentimes small hands on watches, something as small as a watch, sometimes clock faces, other instruments. So you have to have attention to detail. and you have these tiny brushes with these fine points, and you have your radium paint in front of you, and you dip your brush into the radium paint, you paint the numerals, and then to get your brush to a point again, you were told by the higher ups in the company, in the factory, to either lick your brush or put it in your mouth and make it a tip. Basically, you're sucking the tip of the brush to make it a point again. So what these women learned very early on is that radium, well, because it glows in the dark, it also makes other things in its vicinity glow in the dark. So if you're working in this factory all day, the dust is getting on your clothing, which means when you go out at night, you're glowing, your skin is glowing because the dust is all over you. So these women started to paint their nails, started to paint their teeth to give them a fashionable look when they went out at night. Another thing that radiation does is it can get into your bones. So these women would literally have luminescent bones through their skin. This became a very fashionable and desired look. So the years go on. Some of these women have worked in these factories for years and years and years, every single day ingesting radium. This turns out to be a problem. As the decade goes on, the demand lowers. Some of these women have to go to different jobs, but they're still feeling the effects. A lot of these women, as the 1910s come to a close, early 1920s, these women start to visit the dentist more because they have pain in their teeth, in their jaws, and their faces. And sometimes when these women are going to the dentist more and more and more, every visit they're losing a tooth or two. One of the workers, Molly, she went to a dentist and she realized that she had holes in her jaw. Her jaw was basically a skeletalized version, a honeycomb of bone that is so unbelievably brittle. Her teeth are falling out, and this is a real issue, and she eventually dies. Now, when she dies, at this time, a lot of these women who worked in the factories and their families realized, well, there must have been a problem working in these factories. We didn't realize it, but now we kind of do. But medical and the companies and the higher ups would always say it was syphilis. So Molly died of syphilis on paper. Later, that was changed, of course, but a lot of these women who were having these issues, well, you probably have syphilis. Don't worry about it. Then 1925 comes around, and it's widely known, or it's starting to gain recognition of what was actually going on in the first place. Around this time, Grace Fryer had major issues. Her bones were so brittle. We're talking about hips, joints, the vertebrae in her back are basically falling apart. And eventually we realize she has cancer too. She's getting tumors and abscesses, and we realize that it's cancer. So about 1926, Grace and some of the workers who worked in the factory at the same time go out and they file a lawsuit against United States Uranium saying, you guys knew what was happening. We have terrible health issues now. A lot of us are dying painful deaths. And this lawsuit was for $1.25 million. This is a class action suit for just over $1 million. Well, how times have changed. The problem was they weren't being taken seriously by any lawyers. Now imagine, obviously, women's rights were a lot different back in the 1920s, first of all. And second of all, you have this conglomerate, United States Uranium, who was going to use every tactic in the book to delay. And they're hoping that these women who are filing this lawsuit are going to die of the illnesses that they know they have, so that the lawsuit just goes away. Around this time, radium sales fell dramatically, and even in the places where they were used, like these factories, you started to see, well, we're starting to use these PPE, personal protective equipment, to protect ourselves. The higher ups at these companies were doing it for years in the early 20s, but now as we go into the late 20s, even the workers on the floor of these factories are using protective equipment because, well, we have to admit, this is going to be a problem for your health if you do it the way we were doing it in 1917. And in 1928, the lawsuit was won, but for a fraction of the money they initially sued for in the first place. So because of this, at least these women got their medical bills taken care of. As we know in the US, you're paying out of pocket if you're not insured, and times were different back then. So at least these women got a little bit of dignity and at least a little bit of care that they wouldn't have been able to afford in many circumstances before. Were they wronged? Absolutely. But at least some of them got to live out their final days with a little bit more comfort due to medical intervention they could now afford. Of course, many suits followed, went on for years and decades after this, and we actually learned quite a bit about radiation, radium, everything about this in this genre, because a lot of these women who worked in these factories later in life, as they started to suffer illnesses, cancers, things like that, had their bodies available for testing, studying, and science, so we could more readily understand for the next generation. This is particularly interesting, one of the first class action lawsuits won by a group of women in the United States. Do you like stories like this? Let me know in the comment section below. Brand new channel, and I want you to put your input. What videos should we make? Let me know in the comment section. Please do hit like and subscribe if you don't mind, and because we do videos every Friday, that means I'll see you next week.